Working with the Disney characters, the Photopass photographers would oftentimes act similar to Attendant, but we weren't an Attendant. There were a lot of similarities and a lot of differences. So here's how we helped and also did our own thing. If you ever get to meet a Disney character, especially at Walt Disney World, but also at many of the other Disney parks, you will oftentimes see another Disney cast member that is there with the character. They walk up with them when they come from backstage, they leave with them, they're helping with the line. These are the Disney character attendants, and they are there to basically be a right-hand man to the character. They are there to help them, to take care of any needs that they might have, to make sure that the line runs smooth. They've got a lot of duties both on and off stage. And as a Photopass photographer, we kind of came alongside them. But when we first started, we were still kind of finding our role and if we were going to be taking over for them in some ways, or if we were going to be just an assistant, and in what ways we were to assist. And so there was a lot of kind of refining the role of a photographer in relation to the character attendant. Long story short, we did not take the character attendant's place, but we did come up as assistants. And in many ways, we would do the same job as the character attendant to free them up to be able to do other things that needed to be done as well. And we actually ended up being a fantastic tag team alongside the characters and the attendants, and it made things run smoothly. But we had to make sure that it was working quite right and that we all kind of knew our roles and when to step out and when we didn't. One of the things that was great for me at the time, again, I came into Photopass about a year and a half after it had really started to kick in the parks, and it was just a few months after they had spread to all 4 of the Disney parks. We had a lot more training than they tend to do now. Personally, I wish they would do more training. I think it would help the photographers a lot. But one of the things that we did was we spent a whole entire day talking about how do we shoot characters, how do we work with the characters, how do we work with the attendants, what is our role. One of the things that was wonderful was we had 2 well-experienced characters that worked with us that day. One of the things that we had a lot of was feedback on, this is good, help us that way, please don't do that. And so a big portion of the training was learning what worked well for the characters, what did not work well for the characters, what would help them. What was especially helpful that day was we actually had a good-sized portion of it that was actually taken right out of the training books for the character attendants. And we went right through some of their training. In particular, how to work the line, some of the ways to work with the character, things to look out for, things to watch out for to help make sure everything is going smooth. And it gave us an ability at that time that when we came in, if the character had one attendant that was running the line, and there was something going on that they had to deal with, we as a photographer that had gone through that training, we had enough training that we could basically run that whole entire thing ourselves if we needed to. Be honest, there were times we did. We could tell this with some of us. We had learned more in that training than some of the attendants had. And it came in extremely useful for us to be able to do that. We learned some of the hand signals and the gestures that the characters would give if there was a need or something that we might not have been aware of, if they had to step off stage, if there was a costume malfunction. And so we learned a lot of these kinds of things, so as we were shooting the pictures, we could keep an eye on things and watch out for that character and help them as if we were an attendant. Good examples for me is while I was shooting pictures, I would actually keep an ear trained on the line right behind me the whole time. And I would constantly be listening to what was happening. Now, this wasn't usually to detect any problems that I didn't normally have an issue with. But what it did do was it allowed me to hear what they were saying behind me, what the parents may be saying to their kids, or what they were saying to each other, and what they were thinking of the character. And it would give me an opportunity to listen, to interact just briefly a little bit, and then to feed that information to the character. Because the character wasn't aware of what was going on online. They were focused on the guests that they were with at that moment. That was their center of attention. And so it allowed me, while I was focusing on the character, to also get a little bit of background, so that way when the character got to meet that guest, by the way, did you know they did this? Hey, I just heard them talking about this. Did you know that you're their favorite? It would create a quick open door for the character and a better interaction that way. It also meant that as I was shooting pictures of the character, I was also keeping an eye on that character for things like costume malfunctions. if somebody's shoe popped off or a button came undone or something like that. I was constantly watching for that. The attendants were as well. And generally, if there was a malfunction, we would let the attendants fix it, depending upon what it was, where they were, what they were doing. If it was something quick and simple, hey, Mickey, come up, let me just check that thing. Did you know that they got an autograph book? And while I'm talking to them out loud about something completely unrelated, I'm fixing their costume. So if you ever see an attendant or a photographer just up there talking to the character about what seems silly, watch their hands. They're more than likely fixing something on the costume and doing it in such a way that hopefully you don't realize that's what they're doing. Footwear is a little more obvious, where you kind of have to get down on your hands and knees, and so that's not as easy to hide. But that's oftentimes how we would fix a costume malfunction. That is assuming that it was a quick and easy fix. If it was something a little more complicated, then we would flag down the attendant and say, hey, Mickey needs to step off and give Minnie a call, or his nephews or something, and let them know that there was actually a costume that needed to be fixed, and get them off stage so they get it fixed properly. We also watched to make sure that the characters were treated well. Again, a lot of times if we were up at the front of the line, the attendant would be towards the middle or the back, making sure everything was going smooth back there, talking to the guests and trying to arrange the line. A lot of times one of the things that happened with them was they got caught in pin trading, because the attendants would wear the lanyards or the little belt pouches that had the pins on them, and so people would come up and ask, hey, can I trade pins? So if the attendant was busy pin trading, well then as a photographer, we were really kind of the ones running the show. Speaking of pins, have you got your SirWillow pin yet? There's a link below to order those. Go check it out. I would appreciate it. Pins. I love pin trading. The attendant would be towards the middle or the back, and we would be the ones with our eyes on the character, and here's what's happening. So if somebody was going to do something that wasn't appropriate, oftentimes it was the photographers that were the first ones to spot it. For example, it's sad how many times the princesses had to worry about guys not treating them appropriately, or kids thinking it might be funny to see what happens if they hit the character or something like that. So we would be the first ones to spot it, and the ones that saying, hey, knock it off, hey, don't do that to my friend. One of the other jobs that we had, and this created a weird conflict sometimes, we were actually told by our supervisors that if we see something inappropriate, to take a picture, scan a blank PhotoPass card so we'd keep it, and that way there was a photographic record of what was going on. But at the same time, we're also trying to tell the character, or the guest, don't do that to my character. And we're shooting other pictures with the guests, so we're kind of scanning two cards, one to keep our proof of misbehavior, and at the same time we're giving them pictures including the misbehavior on their own PhotoPass card. And it created every now and then a weird conflict. But as a photographer, our job sometimes, if we saw an issue, was to get a couple pictures of what was happening in the culprit, so that way if there was an argument later, oh, I didn't do that, well, hey, guess what? We got it in picture. And so we did kind of play that, and if we had seen something after we took the pictures, then we would actually report it to our management and hand them the PhotoPass card with the pictures that we had taken. Here's your evidence, here's what you might need to know. And if it was really bad, that's when we had to write up an incident report. I only had that a couple times, and just one about a character interaction. Oh, that was... I don't remember all the details because it's been a long time, but I remember it was a husband and a father, if I remember right. It was at Epcot. He'd had too much to drink, and he was just way out of line. Not a good thing. You'd ever want to write up an incident report, and this may sound weird, but I'm actually kind of happy I don't really remember that much about it. But we would kind of keep our eyes on that. We would also help to try to make sure things went smoothly. Let's get as many guests up to see the character as possible, but at the same time to make sure that their time with that character is as good as possible. You wanted to get guests through each new family in about 30 seconds to a minute and a half, depending upon how many and what was happening. Because you would have a line and, hey, let's get through as many people as possible. So you did kind of want to push them through, but you wanted to make sure they had a good encounter. And as a photographer, our job was to kind of make sure that went as smooth as possible. Which meant that we would interpret for the characters, especially fur characters, because they couldn't talk. They would be gesturing, and so we would interpret and explain, here's what they're saying, here's what they're asking, here's what they want to know, they really like this, they didn't like that. And so we would be their interpreter that way, so when people didn't understand what was happening. And even on our last couple trips, I'm grateful for the cast members who stepped in and interpreted, because it had been enough years that there were a couple times the characters were saying things and I was going, huh? What? Duh. We would also, us or the attendants, would make sure the first family waiting, hey, get your autograph books out ready, stack them up, open them up, get your pens ready, and make sure they were ready to step up for the character, and that way they could get through everything as quick as possible. So we would prep the front of the line if the attendant wasn't doing that. That was one of the big things we did. The other things, of course, that we did was we were photographers. This is something that some of the attendants would help with, but a lot didn't. It has changed some now, where oftentimes now the character attendants will take the guest camera and shoot with that one, while the photographer from Photopass uses theirs. In the early days, we pretty much did almost everybody's camera. And there were some attendants that they never wanted to touch a camera. They were afraid of dropping it or taking a lousy picture or whatever. So it wasn't unusual for us to have the guest cameras and our cameras, and depending upon where we were shooting, there were times when I would shoot with 2 or 3 cameras hanging on this arm, or 2 or 3 on this arm, and then have my own camera, and you got very good at being able to take the little pocket cameras and flipping them up and then holding them. Now, of course, almost nobody carries around cameras like that anymore. They're all cell phones with no straps, which means now you're holding the camera and then tucking it into a pocket, and then holding it and tucking it into a pocket, and it gets interesting using multiple cameras. But we would also try to make sure that the families were posed. This is something I don't think they do as much in training anymore, because I've noticed even in our pictures, the photographers rarely would coach us on how to pose and make the picture look good. That's something that needs to be worked on. But we would arrange the families to make them look good, to make them look balanced, get the kids in appropriate places, and then tell them where to look. It's amazing how many people don't know where to look. This may be one area that I think people have remembered me as much for this part of my deal when I worked as anything, because I would tend to be fairly flamboyant when I would do it. If there was a family waiting to take care of the picture, I would give directions. Okay, everybody, look over there at your camera. All right, now look right here at Mickey's camera. Again, making sure that everybody knew exactly where to look, how to smile, getting kids' attention, because sometimes you get kids that were staring at the character, and then you make a weird noise to get the kids' attention, like that would almost always get a kid to look. And then you make the parents stop looking at the kids because the kids weren't looking, because the parents were the worst. And make sure that they had a nice looking photo. That was our main job, was to try to make sure that everybody posed and got good looking pictures, and to get around and capture pictures of the interaction. But it was also to make sure that the whole interaction was a good one, so you could get those good pictures. Because if you've got a really awkward, bad interaction, you're not getting good pictures, that's for sure. So that's kind of how we as photographers were working with the attendants. There were some things backstage that the attendants helped with that we didn't. Generally, as photographers, we did not help the characters get dressed and get ready and prepped up and things like that. We would talk to them sometimes, hey, here's how I kind of work. Here's how you work. I like to shoot the guest camera first and then the Photopass camera, or here's what I will say and do. What do you prefer? So we would do some of that backstage. Backstage was really the attendance area, and we would let them do the deal, and if they needed us back there, we would help. But generally, it was on stage where we really would kind of step in and do some of the attendance role. So there's the two. If you've ever dealt with characters as an attendant or a photographer or as a character, what have you seen them do that maybe I missed and forgot to talk about? What do you think would be helpful? I would love to know. Please share it in the comments below. If you've got other questions, share those as well. Thank you to my patrons too for supporting me. My patrons rock. I want to give a huge shout out to Jerry Miller, who signed up as a patron like 3 months ago, and somehow I never got the notification and forgot to call him out. So Jerry, thank you for being a patron. If you want to know more about Patreon and some of the benefits and perks that they get, check the description below. There's a link down there along with all sorts of other links, merchandise, and so much more. Thank you so very much for watching, and have a wonderful, blessed day. You will oftentimes see I don't know what that was. We had a chunk of it that was actually taken right out of the character We had a big chunk of it that was actually taken... I still don't have that right. While it generally didn't... Because I was a very flamboyant... Hey, everybody, look over there at Mickey... Yeah. I would... All right, now look right over here at my camera, or at Mickey's camera. I still don't have that right. Huh? What? Duh. There's my commercial spiel. Done. Yes. Woohoo! If you'd like to know about my merchandise, fan pages, and more, be sure to check the description below. If you'd like to know whenever I've got a new video posted, well, make sure you hit that button right up there and subscribe. If you'd like to watch another one of my videos, I've got a great one for you right here. And if you'd like to be like these wonderful people here and support me financially on Patreon, well, make sure you check the link right there. There's even some extra perks for them. Thank you so much, and God bless.